There's a moment in a lab in 2010 that scientists still talk about. A researcher walks in one morning, and something is off. The tanks have been disturbed. Prey gone from enclosures that should have been sealed. Things moved. Evidence of something that passed through in the night, hunted and disappeared again. She checks the footage. She checks the seals. She checks every logical explanation. Then she looks at the octopus tank. There it is, right where it's supposed to be, perfectly still. Water undisturbed, lid on, as if it never moved at all. It had slipped out through a gap the width of a coin sometime in the night, hunted the neighboring tanks, and returned before morning. Not because it was hungry, its own tank had plenty of food. That octopus wasn't surviving. It was bored. Here's what's strange about that story. We're not surprised when we hear it about a chimpanzee or a raven or a dolphin. Those animals are smart. We know why they're smart. Their intelligence connects back to ours through hundreds of millions of years of shared evolution. We're all running variations of the same basic design. The octopus shares none of that history with us. Its last common ancestor with a human being was something so simple it didn't even have a brain. And yet here it is, problem-solving, hunting strategically, using tools, recognizing faces, and apparently conducting midnight raids on neighboring tanks for fun. Every single thing about this animal should not work. Its body is a biological contradiction. Its intelligence has no right to exist. Even the way it dies makes no sense. And yet, for over 500 million years, it has not just survived, it has thrived. This is the story of an animal that broke every rule life is supposed to follow. To understand why the octopus shouldn't exist, you have to go back, way back, further than you'd expect, about 530 million years ago, in the shallow waters of what would become the ocean we know today. There lived a small, soft-bodied creature. No eyes, no arms, no brain. It sat on the seafloor, filtered water, and waited. It was, for all practical purposes, a clam. That is the octopus's great-great ancestor. Let that sit for a second. The animal that just solved a child-proof container in a lab to get to a crab inside. Its family tree starts with something that couldn't move, couldn't see, and spent its entire existence doing essentially nothing. Now, evolution is full of dramatic transformations. Fish became land animals. Dinosaurs became birds. We accept these leaps because we've had time to get used to them. But the jump from mollusk to octopus is different. It isn't just a physical transformation. It's a cognitive one. And those are far rarer, far harder to explain. Because here's the thing about intelligence. It's expensive. It costs enormous amounts of energy to build and maintain a complex nervous system. Evolution doesn't just hand that out. There has to be a reason, a pressure, a specific set of circumstances that makes intelligence worth the cost. For humans, for primates, for dolphins, we can trace that pressure. Social living, long childhoods, intergenerational learning. These are the engines that drove complex brains to develop over millions of years. The octopus has none of that. It is almost entirely solitary. It has no social group to navigate, no culture to absorb, no parent teaching it how to survive. It hatches alone, figures out the world alone, and dies alone, usually within 2 years of being born. And yet in 2015, when scientists fully sequenced the octopus genome for the first time, what they found stopped them cold. The octopus has around 33,000 protein-coding genes. Humans have around 20,000. More striking than the number was the arrangement. Genes that in every other animal appear in organized, predictable clusters were shuffled, scattered, reshuffled again. One lead researcher said it was so different from anything they'd seen before that it looked less like a product of Earth's evolutionary tree and more like something that had been assembled separately. They used a specific word in the paper to describe it: alien, not metaphorically, as a legitimate scientific observation. The blueprint of this animal is so different from everything else on this planet that the people who study genetics for a living reach for the same word the rest of us use when we run out of explanations. And that was just the DNA. We hadn't even gotten to the body yet. Most animals, when you look closely enough, follow a pattern: a spine, a centralized brain, a heart, blood that runs red because it carries iron. The details change, the sizes, the shapes, the number of limbs, but the underlying architecture is familiar. You can feel the family resemblance between a dog and a whale and a human being, because at some deep level, we all came from the same blueprint. The octopus did not get that blueprint. It got something else entirely. Let's start with the most fundamental thing an animal can have: a brain. The octopus has one. Technically, it sits in the center of its head, donut-shaped, and here's the first problem. Its esophagus runs directly through the middle of it. The octopus literally eats through its own brain, which means if it tries to swallow something too large, it can cause itself neurological damage. That is not good design. That is barely design at all. But the shape isn't even the strangest part. The strangest part is how little the brain actually does. In humans, in every vertebrate we know of, the brain is command central. Every signal, every decision, every movement, it flows through the brain. The brain is the point. In an octopus, the brain controls roughly 1/3 of its own neurons. The other 2/3 live somewhere else entirely, distributed across its 8 arms, roughly 50 million neurons per arm, operating with a degree of independence that has no equivalent anywhere else in the animal kingdom. Each arm can taste, touch, feel, and make decisions without sending a single signal back to the brain. You can sever an octopus arm completely, and for up to an hour afterward, that arm will continue to move, respond to its environment, and recoil from threats. No brain, no body, just an arm, thinking on its own terms. The question scientists are still genuinely debating is whether an octopus experiences itself as one mind or something closer to 9. The cardiovascular system, because this is where it gets stranger. The octopus has 3 hearts. 2 work exclusively to push blood through the gills. 1 pumps it to the rest of the body. The reason it needs 3 is that its blood is extraordinarily inefficient at carrying oxygen compared to ours, because it doesn't use iron to carry oxygen. It uses copper. Copper-based blood runs blue. And while it works well enough in cold, low-oxygen environments like the deep ocean, the moment an octopus has to swim hard, genuinely exert itself, the system gets overwhelmed. Its main heart actually stops beating during sustained swimming. The octopus essentially risks cardiac arrest every time it needs to move fast, so it crawls instead. It conserves. It outsmarts rather than outrunning. It built an entire survival strategy around a flaw in its own biology. And then there is the skin, which is arguably the most impossible part of all. The octopus can change the color, pattern, and physical texture of its entire body in under a second. Not just a patch of skin, all of it, simultaneously, in response to what it sees, what it feels, and in some cases, what its arms are sensing independently of its eyes. The system involves 3 distinct layers of specialized cells working in coordination at a speed that shouldn't be neurologically possible. Color, iridescence, and reflected light, all controlled, all adjustable, all happening faster than a human can blink. Here is the part that should genuinely stop you cold. The octopus is completely colorblind. It cannot see the colors it is producing. It has no way of visually confirming whether its camouflage is working. And yet, it matches its environment with an accuracy that fools animals with full-color vision, researchers with years of experience, and cameras designed specifically to detect it. The current best explanation is that its skin contains light-sensitive proteins that allow it to sample its environment directly, essentially seeing through its own body rather than through its eyes. Which means the octopus doesn't just have one visual system. It has one it's aware of, and one it isn't. A body that thinks for itself, blood that runs on a different element, skin that sees without seeing. None of this should work. All of it works perfectly. There is a moment that researchers who work with octopuses describe again and again, in different labs, in different countries, with different species. The moment the octopus looks back, not a glance, not a reflex, a look, sustained, evaluating, clearly directed at you specifically, not at the movement, not at the food, not at the tank, at you, as if it's running the same calculation you are, trying to figure out what kind of thing you are and what you're likely to do next. Most invertebrates don't do that. Most invertebrates don't have the architecture to do that. The octopus does it so routinely that scientists who study them long enough start doing something professionally uncomfortable. They start giving them names. That instinct is worth paying attention to. It means something. Here is the fact about octopus intelligence that doesn't get talked about enough. Every other animal we consider intelligent, chimpanzees, dolphins, elephants, ravens, even dogs, got that way through a shared process. Social pressure, long developmental periods, accumulated knowledge passed from one generation to the next. Intelligence in those animals is partly inherited, partly cultural. A young chimpanzee learns from its mother. A dolphin calf stays with its pod for years. Even crows have been observed teaching their offspring which human faces to distrust. The octopus has none of this. It hatches from an egg into open water, often microscopic, entirely alone. Its mother is already dead or dying by the time it emerges. There is no pod, no troop, no family unit. No one teaches it anything. Everything it knows, it figures out by itself, in real time, within a lifespan that rarely exceeds 2 years. 2 years. That is the window. A chimpanzee gets half a century to accumulate knowledge and experience. A bottlenose dolphin gets 40 years. The octopus gets roughly the same amount of time as a presidential election cycle, and within that window, it learns to solve problems, use tools, recognize individuals, and apparently conduct unsanctioned nighttime raids on neighboring laboratory tanks. Which brings us to Inky. In 2016, at the National Aquarium of New Zealand, a common octopus named Inky did something that made international news and probably should have made more. Inky's tank had a small gap at the top. Not an obvious one, not a practical exit by any normal measure. Sometime during the night, Inky squeezed through it, crossed several meters of open floor, found a drain pipe that led to Hawke's Bay, and left. No one saw it happen. There was no alarm, no struggle, no evidence of panic, just a gap, a wet trail across the floor, and an empty tank in the morning. What's easy to miss in that story is the planning it implies. Inky had to notice the gap, had to understand what a drain pipe was and where it likely led, had to choose a moment when the lab was empty, and had to execute all of it in a building it had never moved through before, in the dark, on land, an environment it was never designed to navigate. That is not instinct. Instinct doesn't case exits. Instinct doesn't wait for the right moment. That is something uncomfortably close to scheming. Scientists have a loose framework for what produces intelligence in animals. You need a sufficiently complex nervous system. You need an environment that rewards flexible problem-solving over fixed responses. And you need time, developmental time, generational time, for those capacities to build up and refine themselves. The octopus satisfies the first two conditions completely and violates the third one absolutely. It is intelligent on a deadline, smarter than animals with far longer to develop, far more social support, and far deeper evolutionary investment in cognition. It reinvents the wheel every single generation because there is no other option. There is no accumulated culture to inherit, no elder to learn from, just a newly hatched animal, alone in the ocean, figuring out a world that will kill it within 2 years, and it figures it out, every time. There is a version of the intelligence story that is comforting, the version where complex minds are the product of complex social lives, long development, shared culture, where intelligence is something that gets built slowly, carefully, collaboratively, over deep time. The octopus disproves that version entirely. It proves that a mind can bootstrap itself from nothing, in isolation, on a brutal timeline, and arrive somewhere that genuinely surprises the people studying it. That intelligence isn't one thing with one origin, that it can emerge from completely different starting conditions and look completely different when it gets there. We did not invent thinking. We just found one way to do it. The octopus found another, alone, in the dark, in 2 years or less. And then it died, leaving nothing behind. No tools, no teachings, no record for the next one to start all over again. By this point you might be thinking, okay, strange body, impossible intelligence, impressive. But lots of animals are well adapted to their environments. Sharks have been around for 400 million years. Crocodiles barely changed in 200 million. Survival isn't that remarkable. Here's the difference. Sharks and crocodiles survived by becoming very good at one thing and staying that way. They found a formula that worked and locked it in. Their survival is a story of consistency. The octopus's survival is a story of something else entirely. Something that has no clean biological term, but that in any other context we would simply call improvisation. Off the coast of Indonesia, in the shallow waters of the Lembeh Strait, there is a species that takes the idea of camouflage and does something that camouflage was never supposed to do. Most animals that use camouflage blend into the background. They become the rock, the sand, the coral. They disappear. It is a passive strategy. Be invisible, be ignored, survive. The mimic octopus doesn't disappear. It becomes something else dangerous. When threatened, it doesn't just change color or texture. It reorganizes its entire body, posture, movement, silhouette, to impersonate specific animals. A venomous flatfish, a lionfish with its spines fanned out, a banded sea snake, and crucially, researchers have observed it selecting which animal to impersonate based on what predator it's facing. Different threat, different performance. That is not camouflage. That is theater. Deliberate, targeted, audience-aware theater. The gap between blending into a rock and choosing which dangerous animal to perform based on who's watching you, that gap is enormous. It implies a model of how other animals perceive the world. It implies the octopus understands, on some level, what its predator is afraid of. In the cold Pacific waters off Canada's coast, the giant Pacific octopus solves the survival problem in a completely different way. It builds. Researchers have documented giant Pacific octopuses collecting rocks. positioning them deliberately around den entrances, constructing what can only be described as walls. Not random accumulation, specific placement, adjusted over time, modified when the configuration isn't working. In warmer waters, the coconut octopus found a different material. It collects discarded coconut shells, carries them across open sea floor, which is genuinely dangerous for an animal with no protective covering, stacks them, and assembles them into a portable shelter on demand. It has been filmed walking on 2 arms while carrying the shells with the other 6, an awkward, laborious process that serves exactly one purpose: having a hiding place ready wherever it goes. Tool use in animals is rare. Planned, portable, multi-component tool use is rarer still. The list of animals that do it is short and almost entirely made up of vertebrates with large brains and long developmental periods. The coconut octopus is not that, and it doesn't care. But of everything in the octopus's survival toolkit, the most quietly staggering is something you can't see at all. Most adaptation happens across generations. A population faces a new pressure. Individuals with helpful genetic variations survive and reproduce more. Over thousands of years, the population shifts. It is slow, statistical, and completely outside the control of any individual animal. The octopus does something different. Through a process called RNA editing, octopuses can make changes to their protein coding instructions in real time. Not at the DNA level, but at the level of how those instructions are read and executed. In cold water, they've been observed editing the proteins in their own neurons to keep them functioning at low temperatures, not over generations, not over years, in the moment, in response to conditions, right now. The implications of that are hard to fully absorb. Every other animal is, at some level, running the software it was born with. Mutations happen, but slowly, randomly, without direction. The octopus appears to be making targeted edits to its own operating system based on what its environment is currently demanding. It is not just adapting to the world, it is rewriting itself to fit it. And it does this quietly, invisibly, without fanfare. Just another Tuesday for an animal that has been breaking the rules of biology for 500 million years. The shark found a formula and held it. The octopus just keeps writing new ones. Everything we've covered so far points in one direction. An animal this complex, this adaptable, this cognitively remarkable, evolution should be protecting it. Longer lifespan, more generations, more time to refine an intelligence that took hundreds of millions of years to produce. Instead, the octopus gets 2 years, and the way those 2 years end is one of the strangest, most quietly devastating things in the natural world. The male octopus goes first. Shortly after mating, something shifts in his biology. Not gradually, not as a result of injury or illness, but as a programmed sequence. He stops eating. His behavior becomes erratic, repetitive, directionless. His body begins breaking down from the inside while he is still alive, still moving, still technically functioning. He doesn't fight it. There is no fighting it. It was always going to happen. Mating is, for the male octopus, a biological countdown that was set at birth. He is dead within weeks. The female lives longer, but her ending is harder to watch. After laying her eggs, sometimes tens of thousands of them, she finds a den and stops eating, stops hunting, stops doing anything except guarding. For weeks, sometimes months depending on the species, she aerates the eggs with her arms, keeps them clean, keeps predators away. Her body consuming itself the entire time to fuel a vigil she will not survive. Scientists identified the mechanism behind this in the 1970s. A small gland behind the octopus's eyes, the optic gland, triggers and coordinates the entire sequence. Remove it, and something remarkable happens. In one of the more ethically complicated experiments in cephalopod research, scientists did exactly that. A female whose optic gland had been removed abandoned her eggs, started eating again, began exploring, lived significantly longer than she otherwise would have. She showed, by every available measure, more curiosity and engagement with her environment than she had before, which means the octopus's death drive isn't inevitable in any physical sense. The body could continue. The capacity is there. The intelligence is still running. The gland just tells it to stop. Evolution built a kill switch into one of the most sophisticated minds it ever accidentally produced, and set it to trigger the moment that mind had done the one thing evolution actually cared about. It is not a glitch. It was chosen, selected for, refined over millions of years, written into the genome of every octopus alive. Which raises a question that doesn't have a comfortable answer. What exactly is intelligence for, if the system that produces it treats it as disposable the moment reproduction is complete? We tend to think of complex minds as evolution's great achievement, its crowning output, the thing it was all building toward. The octopus suggests a different possibility, that intelligence to evolution is just a tool, useful while it lasts, irrelevant once the eggs are laid. The mother dies in the dark, next to the eggs she never got to see hatch, having spent the last chapter of her life slowly disappearing. Not because something went wrong, but because everything went exactly according to plan. There is no tragedy in it, biologically speaking. It just looks like one. So, where does all of this leave us? A creature that evolved from nothing, built itself on a completely different blueprint, developed genuine intelligence in total isolation, rewrites its own biology in real time, and then dies on a timer, having passed nothing forward, leaving no record, forcing the next generation to discover everything from scratch. It shouldn't work. It works. And that fact, that single stubborn fact, has started to quietly reshape how scientists think about one of the biggest questions there is. Are we alone? Not in a sensational way, not with telescopes and radio signals and grainy photographs, but in a more fundamental, more unsettling way. The question of whether intelligence can emerge elsewhere in the universe depends entirely on how we answer a simpler question first. How many ways can intelligence emerge at all? For most of human history, the honest answer was, we only know of one way. Ours, social, cumulative, built on shared language and intergenerational culture, and a very specific kind of centralized brain. The octopus is a second answer, distributed, solitary, rebuilding itself every generation, running on copper instead of iron, seeing without eyes, thinking with its arms, arriving at tool use, problem-solving, and individual personality through a path that shares almost nothing with ours except the starting point of being alive. NASA astrobiologists study octopuses not because they think the ocean contains aliens, but because the octopus proves something important. That intelligence is not a single destination with a single road leading to it. It is a space of possibilities, and we have only ever explored a tiny corner of it. If it happened twice here, on the same planet, from the same basic chemistry, under the same sun, the question stops being whether it could happen elsewhere. The question becomes how different it would look when it did. The octopus has been in the ocean for over 500 million years, watching, adapting, thinking in a language we don't have the architecture to fully understand. We didn't know it was intelligent until we built labs and put it in tanks and watched it look back at us. It makes you wonder what else is out there, looking back, waiting for us to figure out how to see it.